Hello! Reading Time with Kate is back for the third week. So we're on part 3 now. I'd just like to say my washing machine's going to beep any minute now because the washing's obviously finished. So I hope it doesn't interrupt the story. So at the end of chapter 8, Frank had managed to escape his house after the rather dramatic incidences going on in the toilet with the auntie. So Frank is currently on top of the car listening to what Dad is getting up to. Okay, so we're on chapter 9 and it's called One Job. What if we get caught? It was Frank's father speaking. Get caught doing what? Thought Frank, as he lay on the roof of the Rolls-Royce listening in. If you drive fast enough, no one will get caught, replied a man. I have done all the research. I have plans of the inside. You will be in and out in 2 minutes. I ain't sure about this. It's much bigger than you told me. Just let me pay you back the money I borrowed from you, please, said Dad. I've heard that one 1,000,000 times before from you. I will find a job. There are no jobs in this town, especially for someone who has had to hop to get around. There was a low rumble of mocking laughter from the 2 men in the back seats. Ha 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 ha. You love your boy, don't you? Said the man. Frank gulped. He was talking about him. Yeah, of course I do. I love him more than anything in the world, but he's got to do with all this. What's he got to do with all this? I would hate for anything to happen to him. You leave my boy out of this. Then do what I say. If you ever do anything to hurt my boy, you'll what? Snarled the man in the front passenger seat. Take off your false leg and kick me with it? The 2 men in the back laughed again. Ha ha ha. All right, said Dad. I'll do what you say, but just this once. One job and then I am done. That wasn't too hard now, was it? Purred the man in the front seat. So, Gilbert, I want you to show me that you can still drive. Like in the old days. I can still drive all right, leg or no leg. Then show me. Are you ready? Yes. Hold on tight, replied Dad. The huge Rolls-Royce engine revved up. Then the back wheels spun furiously and clouds of smoke filled the air. Frank couldn't help but splutter at the smell of burning rubber. Oh, poor Frank. He's on top of the car. The boy struggled to his feet so he could jump back on the van parked beside the car. But Dad was much too quick for him. The Rolls-Royce raced off into the night with Frank standing on the roof. Can you see? Poor Frank. Dad has no idea. Chapter 10. No time to breathe. Frank slammed his body down onto the roof of the car and clung on for dear life. The Rolls-Royce had spun out of the pub car park and in no time was speeding down the road at 100 miles an hour. The boy's eyes were watering and his hair was sticking up on end. This was the most dangerous fairground ride of all time. Of course, Dad had no clue that his son was clinging onto the roof of the Rolls-Royce. If he had, the man would never have driven straight through a red light, whiz, swerved sharply to overtake a bus, and crashed through a fence, bash! Before speeding through the park, the Rolls-Royce bobbed up and down on the grass, boom, boom, boom. The boy was bounced into the air, his body thumping up and down on the road. Thud, thud, thud. Just as he dared to open his eyes again, Frank saw that they were heading straight for another fence on the far side of the park. Kaboom! Planks of wood exploded into the air. A large chunk whizzed past the top of Frank's head. Everything was happening so fast that there was no time to breathe. Oh, poor Frank. How on earth is he feeling? The car was heading straight towards an alleyway, which was much narrower than the car itself. If Dad didn't put on the brakes right now, it looked like the Rolls Royce would smash, slap, bang into a brick wall. Stop! Shouted the man in the passenger seat. Ah! Screamed the pair in the back. Instead, the car's engine revved and sped up. No! Came shouts from inside Frank. Frank couldn't take it anymore. The boy had to close his eyes. Chapter 11. 2 wheels are better than 4. On one side of the alleyway was a pile of planks of wood. The Rolls Royce turned sharply and the wheels on the left side mounted the planks and it vaulted onto 2 wheels. Frank opened his eyes again. As he found himself sliding down the side of the car roof, his fingers desperately clawed to get a grip. Still on 2 wheels, the car just made it through the narrow alleyway. Whiz! You're squashing me! Came a shout from inside the car. Bursting out of the other side of the alley, Dad turned the steering wheel sharply and the car bounced back down to 4 wheels. Just as Frank breathed a sigh of relief, a siren blared. Nee-naw, nee-naw. Blue shadows flashed on the buildings around them. The boy looked over his shoulder. A police car was chasing after them. Dad put his foot down on the accelerator and the Rolls Royce whizzed off the wrong way down a main road. Frank couldn't believe his eyes. The car was weaving in and out of the traffic, coming straight at them. Lorries and cars swerved as Dad managed to twist and turn just in time. It was thrilling and terrifying all at once. Up ahead, a wall of flashing blue light was travelling rapidly towards them. For a moment, Frank struggled to work out what it was. He squinted. It was the police. A line of police cars were travelling towards them at speed. They were driving in formation, blocking out the whole road. There was no way around them. There was no way under them. There was no way through them. They were trapped. Dad was a champion race driver, but surely even he could not win this time. Frank breathed a sigh of relief. This horrifying ordeal was over. He was going to see his 12th birthday after all. However, instead of slowing down, guess what Dad did? Dad sped up, so it got faster. Between the Rolls Royce and the wall of the police cars was a huge lorry. The lorry's trailer was one that transported cars, though right now it was empty. The lorry driver must have panicked at seeing this car speeding straight towards him. As the vehicle spun round dramatically in the middle of the road, screech, and came to a halt, Dad seized his chance and sped towards the back of the lorry. The ramp for loading cars was down. The Rolls Royce powered on straight at it. It hit the ramp and raced up to it. When it reached the top, the Rolls Royce took off and flew through the air. Whiz! The boy could feel his heart beating to his chest. Boom, boom, boom. It was beating so hard it felt as if he was going to burst out of him. Time slowed down and sped up all at once. Frank was flying. He wanted it to end right now. He never wanted it to end. The Rolls-Royce soared over the line of police cars, just clipping the roof of one with a back tyre on the way down. Crunch. Can you see? Frank on top of the car, and then Dad has managed to jump over all of the police cars. Before it crash landed on the road behind the wall of cars with a huge bump, Frank thought he was going to be hurled into the air as the car bounced down the road like a football. Boom, boom, boom. The boy just managed to grip onto the roof of the Rolls-Royce. In no time, the car righted itself and sped off down the road. Frank looked over his shoulder to see the chaos his father had caused. The policemen were struggling to turn their cars round, but as they had stopped in tight formation, they had blocked themselves in. The police cars bashed into each other as they attempted to give chase. Bash, crash, crunch. Despite nearly dying 100 times, the boy couldn't help but smile. His hero of a dad had done it again. Now his dad's very clever to get out of that situation. Although it's very bad, he's clearly very good at driving. Chapter 12. Hurl. With Frank still clinging to the roof, the Rolls-Royce raced back into the pub car park. Dad must have been in a triumphant mood after his daring jump over the police cars. As he spun the car round backwards into its original parking space, missing the neighbouring vehicles by a centimetre, screech! The Rolls-Royce came to such an abrupt halt that Frank couldn't hold on any longer. The force of the stop meant that the boy was instantly catapulted from the roof of the car. Whoosh! He soared through the air as if he had been shot out of a cannon, and he landed in a bush. Oof! Rustle! Fortunately, the bush cushioned his fall and no bones were broken. Oh, that's a relief. Although Frank was dazed, he instantly picked himself up and hurried off to find somewhere safe to hide. He didn't want his father to discover he was out late at night in his pyjamas spying on him. If so, the boy was in big trouble. And also the fact that he was on top of the car, knowing what his dad gets up to. "What was that?" shouted the man in the passenger seat. "What was what?" replied one of the men in the back. "There must have been someone on the roof of my motor." "After them," shouted the first man. The two men in the back stumbled out of the car. One was tall, the other was big and bulky. Frank watched from his hiding place behind a bin in the pub car park. The pair must have been feeling the worse for wear since their stunt drive, as they both looked wobbly. Their faces had turned green and they were bent over, taking shallow breaths. "I said after them! What are you waiting for, Fingers?" "I can't, Governor. I think I'm going to hurl," replied the tall, thin one. "You then, Thumbs." The bulky one had tears in his eyes. "I wet myself, Governor," he murmured. "I can't run in wet underpants." "Why not?" "Me mum says I'll get a rash." "You pair of useless twits," he shouted. "Gilbert, after them." Dad climbed out of the car. Since losing his leg, the man walked with a limp. His wooden leg always dragged behind him. "I am sorry, Mr. Big, it's late. I have the babysitter at home. I gotta go." The little man's eyes narrowed and his words shot out like bullets. "Bam, bam, bam. You are not listening. There was someone on the roof of my roller. Now the three of you, find them now." Mr. Big might have not been big, but when he snarled, it was like coming face to face with a crocodile. Immediately, Fingers, Thumbs and Dad all did what they were told. Thumbs waddled awkwardly as you might well do if you'd wet your pants. Fingers jabbed Dad in the back, pushing him forward to face whatever danger was lurking in the shadows. Hiding behind the bin, Frank had nowhere to run. Oh, I hope they don't spot Frank. He leaned back into the darkness, praying he would not be seen. The three men paced nearer to him. Fingers searched the bushes, skimming the branches with his long, thin digits. Meanwhile, Thumbs was huffing and puffing, getting down on his knees to look under the cars. "Nothing here, Governor," called out Thumbs. "Nor here, Governor," added Fingers. Dad was now so near Frank that the boy could hear his father's breathing. The man peered behind the bin. Squatting there was his own son, looking guilty and scared and shaken by the ride. "Is anyone there?" shouted Mr. Big. "No, no one," replied Dad, staring his son straight in the eye. No one at all." Dad shook his head slightly. The boy took this as a signal to stay as still and quiet as he possibly could. If he moved a muscle, they would both be in deep trouble. "It must have been a bird, Mr. Big," said Dad. "Ruddy big bird," muttered the little man. "Now we have to get out of here before the fuzz starts sniffing around. Fingers, get the rolls resprayed and change the number plates in case they trace it." "Yes, Governor." "Thumbs, you can drive now." "Thank you, boss," replied the bulky one. "I want to get home in one piece. Now pile in, all of you." Dad paced back to the car with his head down, no doubt nervous about giving something away. "What's going on with you?" hissed Mr. Big. The crime boss was as sharp as a knife. Nothing got past him. "Nothing? I can trust you, can't I?" "Yes, sir, absolutely." "Good. I would hate any harm to come to that boy of yours. Now get in." From his hiding place, Frank heard the doors to the Rolls-Royce shut. Clunk. The car sped off into the night. A feeling of deep unease descended upon the boy. His father was mixed up with some very bad people. Interesting. Right, we'll leave it there. We're on chapter 12. Okay? See you next week. Bye-bye.